Kristen Walsh didn't ask for his name. She didn't scan his pass. She just looked Julian Carter up and down. Black skin, quiet posture, platinum ticket in hand, and tore it in half. "You're in the wrong section," she snapped. "Try economy, or whatever seat people like you can actually afford." Around him. The first-class cabin froze. Conversations stopped. A man in 3B lowered his newspaper. A woman clutched her pearls. And Julian? He didn't say a word. He bent down, picked up the shredded pass, and took his seat anyway. Silent, dignified. But inside, he was already shutting the airline down. Before we begin this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever been humiliated, told you didn't belong, and still chose to rise with quiet strength instead of rage? If so, this story is yours. Watch what happens when power doesn't scream. It simply acts. Share your story in the comments. The Apex Air Boeing 737 hadn't moved yet. Grounded at Miami International Airport for what was supposed to be a brief 10-minute systems check. But what unfolded in those minutes would ground far more than a plane. Julian Carter. Dressed in a charcoal Xenia blazer and seated calmly in 2A, stared ahead as if the torn ticket hadn't happened, as if the whispers and glances hadn't rippled through the cabin. Kristen hovered, arms crossed, eyeing him with the satisfied smirk of someone who believed her bias would be backed by policy. "You think money buys everything?" she murmured under her breath, loud enough for Julian to hear. "But some of us remember how Vanguard rejected our people." Julian turned his head slightly. "You're referring to Horizon Dynamics," he said, his voice even. Her posture stiffened. She hadn't expected him to know. He always knew. Diane Heller, a private equity tycoon known for sinking companies and sipping champagne mid-collapse, leaned toward him from 2C. "You can switch with me, sweetheart. I think you'd be more comfortable in the back." Julian didn't respond. She wasn't offering comfort, only confirming what Kristen had started. Then Kristen leaned over and tapped the control panel on Julian's seat. The recline disabled. The reading light dimmed. Even the call button was shut off. "Malfunctioning seat," she announced. "Sorry, safety first." No one questioned it, but the atmosphere thickened. From row 4, a phone rose. "That's all on video," said Noah Reed, a young documentary vlogger flying to London. His phone lens framed Kristen's face, Julian's composed silence, and Diane's amused posture. "Ma'am, are you disabling this man's seat because it's malfunctioning, or because he's black?" he added, loud enough for the cabin to hear. Across the aisle, Mia Jang had already gone live to her 1 million followers. Her caption read, "Apex Air exposed, #JulianGate." Kristen spun around. "Phone's down or we'll call security," she warned. Her voice cracked slightly. She was losing grip. From the rear, a woman rose from economy and headed to the lavatory. She paused just long enough to meet Julian's eyes. Isabel Gomez, Vanguard's discreet ethics officer, didn't say a word, just nodded and continued walking. The nod was enough. Moments later, Kristen leaned toward Julian again. "Ticket doesn't scan. System shows void. You're not on this manifest." Julian reached into his blazer, retrieved his platinum Apex Air card engraved with his initials, and held it up without a word. Kristen took it, scoffed, and said, "This doesn't mean anything." That's when a voice from the front galley chimed in. "Actually, it means a lot." Evan Brooks, Julian's tech assistant, stepped forward, tablet in hand. Clad in gray slacks and a badge reading VX Systems Authorized, he approached with the kind of precision that made people notice. He handed the tablet to Julian and stepped aside. Kristen rolled her eyes. "What is that? A complaint form?" Julian tapped 3 times and held the screen at an angle. "This is my seat, my flight, and..." He paused. My company. Diane blinked. Excuse me? But before she could push further, another voice entered the scene, this one louder. From the rear, a man, stocky and red-faced, came rushing up the aisle. "I don't feel safe," he shouted, pointing. "He was arguing with staff. I saw it. He's aggressive." The performance was amateur, but Kristen latched on quickly. "Sir, we're handling this," she said to the crowd. "Not to the accuser. We're prioritizing cabin safety." Julian didn't move. "I've said less than 20 words since I boarded," he stated calmly. "But if you want to see what real disruption looks like, give it 7 more minutes." Diane scoffed. "Is that a threat?" Noah kept filming. "Oh, it's gonna get real," he whispered. "This plane's about to go viral." In the lavatory, Isabel triggered the secure ping to Chairman Gregory Holt, attaching Kristen's footage, Diane's remarks, and the full passenger manifest that confirmed Julian Carter, CEO of Vanguard Enterprises, was seated in 2A with verified credentials. Isabel also routed the footage to 4 journalists, 3 board members, and 1 PR crisis firm, all on Vanguard's emergency watch list. Up front, Kristen stood frozen, phone in hand, lips tight. Evan leaned toward Julian. "Chairman Holt is on a secure line. Isabel's uploaded the internal logs. Tyler's digital manipulation is confirmed." Julian gave a slight nod. "Stand by. Phase Sigma in 90 seconds. The Wi-Fi in the cabin, long, spotty, and restricted to premium subscribers, suddenly surged to full strength. Tablets lit up. Notifications buzzed. Mia's live stream gained 12,000 viewers in under a minute. Kristen stepped back, scanning the cabin. Something had shifted. Julian sat still, but the air around him vibrated with intent. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to stand. Kristen had drawn the first line. He was about to erase the whole board. Kristen Walsh's grip on control was already slipping, but she couldn't see it yet. Standing in the narrow aisle, she clutched her crew tablet like a shield, flicking through screens with forced authority. "Mr. Carter's seat has been marked canceled," she declared, tapping twice and rotating the display toward a nearby flight attendant. "Systems flagged it." That attendant, Tyler Quinn, barely glanced at the screen before nodding. He wasn't acting on information. He was acting on loyalty. Quiet, nervous, misdirected loyalty. Just a week earlier, he'd been overheard complaining about Vanguard's takeover culture and the so-called diversity strings it brought. Now, Julian Carter, the symbol of that culture, was sitting in his cabin. And Kristen? She was just the weapon he needed. Diane Heller smirked in her seat, adjusting the collar of her cream Chanel coat. She leaned across the aisle to Kristen. "Listen, I'll make it worth your while," she said under her breath, slipping a folded envelope into Kristen's palm. "Some people don't belong up here, and we both know it." Kristen didn't protest. She didn't hesitate. She tucked the envelope into her pocket with the smoothness of someone who'd done it before. But this time, someone was watching. Noah Reed's camera zoomed in on the exchange, Kristen's fingers closing over the envelope, Diane's smug expression, and Julian sitting unmoved, absorbing it all like data points in a hostile acquisition. From her aisle seat, Mia Jiang spoke into her phone. Still live streaming. "We just witnessed a passenger offering a bribe to a flight attendant. On camera. The target? A black businessman who's been humiliated since he boarded." The comment feed exploded. Hashtag Apex Air Scandal was now trending. From the back galley, Isabel Gomez sent the footage to Apex Air's media crisis team with a simple subject line: "Urgent. Breach of federal ethics protocol." Her second message went directly to Chairman Holt. "Boardroom must convene now. Bribery evidence attached. Manipulated data confirmed." At the front of the cabin, Evan leaned forward, tablet in hand. "We're good to go," he whispered. "NBC just picked it up. Holtz cleared phase Sigma. Julian nodded, fingers still interlocked, posture steady. His silence wasn't retreat. It was the tension before a lever gets pulled. Kristen, unaware that her downfall had already begun broadcasting coast to coast, returned to Julian's row with an exaggerated smile. "Would you like something to drink while we sort your ticket?" she asked sweetly. "Water, perhaps." She didn't wait for an answer. She turned, took a cup, and accidentally spilled it across his lap. "Oh," she gasped with mock concern. "So sorry. These things happen." Julian didn't flinch. He took a napkin from the tray, wiped his hand, and placed it neatly on the armrest. "This plane," he said calmly, "has a leak far worse than that cup." Tyler stepped forward, holding his own tablet. "Security has been notified," he said stiffly. "You may be asked to disembark pending verification." "On what grounds?" Evan asked, already recording. "Internal records just flagged this passenger as a boarding mismatch." Tyler replied, "System error. Happens more often than you'd think." But Julian had designed the system Tyler was now abusing. He knew every security protocol, every code pathway, every back-end patch. This wasn't a system error. This was sabotage. And Julian Carter had built his empire on exposing precisely this kind of malpractice. From seat 3A, a middle-aged man finally spoke up. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said. "This is harassment." The woman next to him nodded. "I paid for my seat too, but nobody's tearing up my boarding pass." In row 5, a flight attendant off-duty on travel perk turned on her phone and began filming as well. The tide was turning. Kristen's voice grew shrill. "Everyone stay seated. This is a minor issue being handled internally." But it wasn't minor anymore. It wasn't internal. NBC's evening ticker had just flashed a live alert. Apex Air under scrutiny after viral first-class incident. On-screen footage showed Kristen tearing the pass, accepting the bribe, and spilling water. All without Julian uttering a single aggressive word. He didn't have to. The evidence was screaming for him. Back in the galley, Isabel had just overridden Tyler's false seat cancellation in the system logs, restoring Julian's 2A status in real time. Simultaneously, she exposed Tyler's prior login to tamper with passenger data, a violation that would carry felony weight under FAA guidelines. Evan confirmed it aloud. "Tyler Quinn manipulated a federally regulated manifest. We have logs, screen captures, and timeline alignment. We're forwarding everything to the board, DOJ, and FAA compliance." Kristen, suddenly pale, looked at Tyler. "You told me his seat was void." Tyler stammered. "It was. At the time. I thought." Julian looked up, eyes calm. It's interesting how often the truth becomes optional when power is unchecked. The entire first-class cabin had gone quiet. Passengers were no longer passive. Some were openly recording. Others whispered in disgust. Diane, sensing the shift, shrank back into her seat, pulling her coat closed like it could protect her from accountability. At the cockpit door, the captain had now been alerted and stood speaking to ground control, holding a printed report with the words CEO Vanguard bolded in the top corner. The pieces were moving quickly now, the structure buckling. Isabel had uploaded footage to 3 partner newsrooms and flagged the legal team with an encrypted folder titled Exhibit A, In-Flight Breach. Chairman Holt's assistant confirmed that the Apex Air Board had entered emergency session via encrypted call. Julian remained seated, dry-eyed, unbothered by the wet slacks or the power games unraveling beside him. He turned to Evan. "Activate the projection," he said quietly. "It's time." From the cabin ceiling, a hidden screen lowered above the aisle. An emergency use projector Apex Air installed for safety briefings but rarely used. On it flashed the Vanguard logo, then a live feed of Apex Air's boardroom in New York. Faces stared back, some stunned, some already bracing. A digital timer in the bottom corner began to count down. 4 minutes, 59 seconds. Kristen stared upward, her mouth slightly open. "What is this?" Julian replied without looking at her. "This," he said, "is the shareholder meeting, and I'm the majority." Silence fell again, heavier than before. The coup wasn't coming. It had arrived. The moment the Vanguard shareholder meeting lit up the cabin screen, the illusion of control shattered. Kristen Walsh froze mid-stride, her voice caught in her throat as the boardroom's crisp video feed flickered to life above the aisle. Rows of Apex Air executives filled the screen, some straightening ties, others with eyes wide, watching Julian Carter, still seated in 2A, through the embedded camera on his tablet. For years, Julian had attended these meetings in private, dialing in from boardrooms with panoramic city views or soundproof tech lounges. But today, he brought the meeting to the people who tried to strip his dignity at 37,000 feet. Kristen glanced at Tyler, then at Diane, who now visibly recoiled into her seat, hiding behind her oversized designer tote as if brand logos could shield her from public disgrace. But it was too late. The broadcast had already taken hold, and no amount of denial could rewrite what was unfolding in real time. Tyler, still clinging to the hope of escape, began fumbling through system menus on his tablet, attempting to deactivate the screen. But Isabel, seated quietly in economy with a second override device in her lap, anticipated every move. The projector feed locked, the system control panel froze. A red prompt flashed across Tyler's screen. Access revoked. System admin override. He looked up, defeated, sweat now visibly pooling at his collar. Then came the final blow. Kristen, desperate to reclaim even a shred of authority, grabbed Julian's briefcase from the overhead bin and dropped it into his lap with a thud. "You'll need to take that with you when you're escorted off," she muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The implication, criminal, suspicious, dangerous, was sharp, weaponized in a single sentence. Julian slowly placed the briefcase on the floor beside his feet, then leaned back in his disabled seat and said, without raising his voice, "I suggest you step away." His tone didn't invite debate. It closed it. Diane, who had remained smug for most of the ordeal, reached forward and pressed the flight attendant call button. "This is absurd," she hissed. "We're being held hostage by theatrics." But the screen above now displayed not theatrics, but documentation, footage of Kristen tearing Julian's boarding pass, followed by the bribe captured in crisp HD, then a freeze frame of the spilled water, the fake seat cancellation, and Tyler's manipulation logs time-stamped and authenticated over this. A clear voice narrated, "Apex Air internal footage confirms targeted profiling and violation of federal anti-discrimination protocols." The voice belonged to Isabel. The audience now included not just the first-class passengers, but media outlets across the country. NBC had interrupted a mid-afternoon cooking segment to break the story. CNN had gone live with a headline, "Black CEO targeted mid-flight, Apex under investigation." As this streamed on, Kristen made one last desperate play. She stepped to the front of the cabin and activated the intercom. "Due to unforeseen circumstances," she began, voice trembling slightly, "we are initiating a precautionary security hold. Please remain in your seats and disable all electronic devices." But her voice didn't get past the last syllable before the feed overrode it. Isabel's voice returned, louder now. "This is an authorized shareholder action. Apex Air's first-class cabin is being used to transmit verified corporate evidence to board governance teams. This plane will not depart until protocol completion." Kristen turned pale. The cabin had become a courtroom. Noah Reed, still filming, whispered into his camera. "We're witnessing history. This isn't just a takedown. It's corporate surgery." Mia, tears threatening her eyeliner, held her phone steady as she streamed to over 500,000 live viewers. "This is what happens when power doesn't have to shout to win," she said. But Apex Air wasn't done trying. The lights suddenly dimmed. A loud chime echoed across the cabin. Emergency protocol had been triggered, by Kristen or Tyler. It wasn't clear, but the effect was immediate. All onboard Wi-Fi connections dropped. Tablets went black. The projector screen powered down mid-broadcast. For a few tense seconds, the plane fell into an eerie silence, lit only by the soft pulsing of exit signs. Kristen exhaled, convinced she had regained some ground. Then, a flicker. The projector roared back to life. A new image appeared. Julian Carter, live on camera, holding a device linked directly to the backup server. "Nice try," he said, calm as ever. "But I own the infrastructure too." Audible gasps swept through the cabin. Diane reached for her bag, fumbling with trembling hands. Kristen stood paralyzed. Tyler sat down abruptly, his tablet falling to the floor. Passengers began whispering, some applauding softly, others pulling out phones again to record this second resurrection. "Now," Julian said, speaking not just to the cabin but directly into the feed. "Let me be clear." He stood, not in anger but in finality. "This flight is grounded, not by weather, not by maintenance, but by the weight of unchecked bias. And I'm grounding the company that allowed it." He raised one hand, pressing a blue-lit confirmation icon on his screen. A timestamp locked in. Apex Air Fleet Shutdown, 3:16 p.m. EST. Initiated by majority shareholder. That image would be replayed for years in corporate ethics seminars, on network news, and in every shareholder policy training across the aviation industry. In the cockpit, the captain received the alert simultaneously. The gate crew outside paused their loading sequence as flight control transmitted the unusual directive. "Flight 227, canceled by primary stakeholder authority." No further explanation, just a halt. Absolute and total. Julian lowered his tablet and returned to his seat. "Now," he said to Kristen, "you may bring me that water." The cabin was silent except for the hum of the air system and the distant thump of someone's heartbeat. No one knew whose, but everyone felt it. On the screen suspended above the aisle, the Vanguard shareholder interface reappeared, this time displaying a full-resolution dashboard showing Julian Carter's verified ownership. Vanguard Enterprises, 51% stakeholder, Apex Air Holdings. Passengers stared, jaws slack. The woman in 3D whispered, "He owns it?" As if she were translating a prophecy she never believed. Kristen Walsh took one trembling step backward, bumping into the galley cart behind her. Her authority fully dissolved under the weight of the reveal. She glanced to Tyler, who was now slumped in a jump seat, his screen lifeless, wiped clean by Isabel's override just moments earlier, Diane Heller, realizing she had misjudged not just a man, but an empire. Slowly pulled her scarf higher around her neck, eyes darting toward the window as if she could jump out of 2C and vanish into the humid Miami tarmac. But they were all locked in now, trapped not by a delay or security protocol, but by a reckoning centuries in the making. Julian remained seated. He hadn't stood to raise his voice or posture for power. His mere presence, amplified through truth and infrastructure, had already dismantled the false hierarchy around him. The screen shifted again, this time showing a split view. On the left, live footage from the first-class cabin. On the right, a log of documented incidents compiled by Isabel, timestamps, names, and ethics violations spanning 18 months. The list was damning. Flight 661, discriminatory offboarding. Flight 804, denied seating reassignment to disabled passenger. Flight 1189, crew altered records to remove minority passengers from upgrade queue. Kristen's name appeared in bold on 3 of them. The plane itself had become the courtroom, the screen a witness, and Julian the judge, not by title, but by consequence. Michael Brennan, the cabin manager, finally emerged from the cockpit area, his face flushed with the realization that this was no longer a matter of airline policy. It was a corporate emergency. "Sir," he began cautiously, "perhaps we can move this discussion to a private setting. The board may be able to handle this more." Julian cut him off with a glance, not hostile, but absolute. "We're already handling it," he said. "This is the setting. And what you're witnessing is the board meeting you never thought would reach this cabin." Michael looked to Kristen, who could offer no help. She was now busy swiping aimlessly at her device, hoping it would reboot. It didn't. Julian's voice deepened, not louder, but more resonant, like the calm pressure that precedes a landslide. "This airline has been warned. My office submitted 3 separate reports over the past year citing behavioral complaints, unexplained passenger profile tags, and digital tampering. Each time, Apex Air claimed no violations could be confirmed. Today, that narrative ends. At that moment, Evan activated the next screen, which now showed a live shareholder poll. The title, "Immediate Termination of Key Personnel, Flight 227 Crew Review." Voting had begun. Green checkmarks lit up next to Kristen Walsh, lead flight attendant, and Tyler Quinn, tech operations. A third name, Diane Heller, private equity advisor, ad hoc guest, appeared below with an asterisk and a line of legal text indicating her violation of Investor Code of Conduct during active flights. Kristen tried to protest. "You can't do this. This isn't a trial." Julian tilted his head. "It's not a trial. It's a correction." Just then, Isabel's voice returned, piped through the cabin audio. "Final vote results in majority shareholder support confirmed. Terminations effective immediately. Notification letters issued. Security personnel will meet the involved parties upon disembarkation." Kristen slumped, her hands shaking. Tyler was already in tears. Diane opened her mouth to speak, but thought better of it. Behind them, passengers applauded, not wildly, but slowly, purposefully, like jurors in an age-old battle finally delivering a just verdict. Michael stepped back toward the cockpit, reaching for the phone to call ground ops. But the screen interrupted him one last time. A new video began to play, one never meant for the public. Internal Apex Air training footage, obtained through an anonymous source and decrypted by Evan just minutes earlier. Now lit up the cabin. It showed Kristen in a staff-only meeting saying, "Some people aren't fit for first class. You can tell before they even hand you their ticket." Laughter followed from off-camera voices, among them, Tyler's. The video cut to black. The cabin sat in stunned silence. Julian turned to Evan. "Activate Fleet Sigma." Evan nodded and tapped the command. From headquarters, a secure order was issued to ground all non-emergency Apex Air flights, pending further investigation and internal review. Within minutes, airport monitors across the country would begin updating Apex Air, operational hold. The airline hadn't just been interrupted. It had been taken offline, indefinitely. Julian looked out the window as the Miami rain began to streak down the glass, then turned back to Kristen. "You used a uniform to hide entitlement. I used silence to deliver truth. We're not the same." As he spoke, Noah stood slowly in the aisle, filming. "He didn't raise his voice once," he said to the camera. "But he just brought down an entire airline." In that moment, justice wasn't loud. It was precise, surgical, corporate, and irreversible. Kristen stood frozen near the galley wall, the screen overhead still glowing with the termination order that now bore her name, her authority, her certainty, even the practiced edge in her tone. Gone, stripped clean in front of the very passengers she once commanded. "This is a mistake," she stammered, her voice unrecognizable now, quieter, thinner. "You can't fire me from here, this isn't protocol." But even she didn't believe her own words anymore. The uniform she wore no longer shielded her. In fact, it exposed her. Michael Brennan, the cabin manager, tried to step in, hoping to salvage some shred of order. "Mr. Carter," he said, his tone strained. "I think it's time we all calmed down and allowed this matter to be handled through the appropriate internal review channels." Julian turned his head slowly. Not angry, not theatrical, just done. "Internal review is what let this rot fester," he said, his voice firm but measured. "What happened here today wasn't just a bad decision. It was a pattern of exclusion, disrespect, and manipulation protected by layers of silence. That ends now." He stood from his seat in 2A, finally rising, not because he needed to intimidate, but because truth carries its own gravity. He faced the cabin, not just Kristen or Tyler or Diane, but every single passenger who had sat and watched. "My name is Julian Carter," he said, his voice clear. "I'm the CEO of Vanguard Enterprises, and as of this quarter, I'm the majority owner of Apex Air." Murmurs rippled across the cabin like aftershocks. A man in 1D lowered his phone, stunned. A couple in row 3 exchanged glances, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Even the off-duty attendant in row 5, who had quietly begun recording again, put her phone down, hand to her chest. "This flight, this plane, this entire company, runs on the reputation it built pretending it stood for fairness." Julian continued. "But it's been rotting from the inside. What happened here wasn't new. It was just filmed." Kristen stepped forward, trying to reclaim the floor. But Julian turned slightly toward her, gaze steady. "You've made passengers feel small for years. You tampered with seats, profiles, upgrades, until people believed it was just a glitch. But there's no glitch in bias. It's deliberate, and it's over." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Diane finally stood, clutching her designer bag like it could protect her from consequence. This is revenge," she spat. "You're humiliating us because we embarrassed you." Julian shook his head once. "No, I'm holding you accountable because you've never been embarrassed enough to change." At that moment, the cabin intercom crackled. A voice came through. Not Kristen's, not the captain's, but Gregory Holt, chairman of Apex Air, speaking directly from headquarters. "This is Gregory Holt. As chairman of the board, I confirm that the terminations of Kristen Walsh and Tyler Quinn are effective immediately, with cause. Furthermore, Ms. Diane Heller is hereby banned from all future Apex Air flights, pending legal review for investor ethics violations." A pause. Then, more quietly, "To our passengers, we extend our deepest apologies. This behavior is not who we claim to be, and now, it will not be who we are." Silence fell like a gavel. Kristen sank into the jump seat, defeated. Tyler pulled his lanyard off his neck and let it fall to the floor. Diane turned her face toward the window and didn't speak again. But it wasn't over. Julian turned to Evan, who was standing by with the Vanguard Systems console still open. "Initiate full shutdown," Julian said. "Fleet-wide." Evan tapped the screen. A soft tone played through the cabin speakers. Every passenger's tablet and phone lit up with the same message. "Notice, Apex Air operations temporarily suspended. Fleet grounding in progress by order of controlling stakeholder." Gasps rose across the cabin. "Wait! What does that mean?" a man in row 1 asked aloud. Julian answered without hesitation. "It means no Apex Air flight leaves another runway until this culture changes. Starting today." Noah Reed's phone was still rolling. "I just watched a man get told he didn't belong," he whispered to the camera, and then watched him take down the very system that tried to exclude him. Mia, seated near the exit row, was crying quietly, not out of sadness, but release. She looked around the cabin and said to no one in particular, "Maybe this is what justice really looks like." Julian took one breath, then another. "We'll rebuild this airline," he said, "but we'll do it without the rot, without the silence, without people like you," he added, looking directly at Kristen, Diane, and Tyler in turn. He sat down again in seat 2A, reclaiming what was always his, not just the chair, but the space. And as he did, the cabin filled not with applause, not with cheers, but with something far rarer: respect, quiet, humbled, irreversible respect. The ripple effect was instant. From Miami to Seattle, from O'Hare to LAX, airport monitors flickered and shifted. Apex Air flight delayed. Apex Air canceled. Apex Air ground stop in effect. Confused passengers pressed against terminal counters, while airline staff whispered frantically into headsets, their screens blinking red with messages they'd never seen before. At corporate headquarters, operations managers scrambled to respond, only to find themselves locked out by a firewall protocol labeled Vanguard Override, Executive Lockdown. Inside the first-class cabin of Flight 227, Julian Carter remained composed, the epicenter of a disruption so vast it couldn't be spun or silenced. He didn't gloat. He didn't gesture for praise. He simply watched the system yield to justice as effortlessly as it once enabled injustice. Evan leaned in. "Shutdown executed. All non-essential aircraft grounded. Logistics division confirming full compliance. PR team just published the shareholder statement. CNN already picked it up." Isabel's calm voice came through Julian's earpiece. "FAA acknowledged the fleet-wide order. No violations. Holt's team is moving forward with the audit announcement. The legal team's greenlit your disclosures. Full transparency. Just as you wanted." Julian nodded once. Everything was moving. But this wasn't about revenge. It never had been. Julian's silence, his stillness, that had been mistaken for compliance. In reality, it was strategy, a lifetime of it. He pulled out a different device now, sleek, matte black, and coded to his biometric signature. As he unlocked it, the screen displayed the title, AirVigil, Real-Time AI Bias Detection Platform, Vanguard Beta Launch. With one touch, Julian authorized the release. In less than 60 seconds, press releases went live across financial and tech media outlets. A new division of Vanguard was going public, one built to monitor, track, and expose discriminatory patterns in transportation, hospitality, and corporate service industries in real time. Using layered AI tools, behavioral audits, and passenger feedback loops, the platform promised accountability on a scale previously unthinkable. "It's live," Evan confirmed. "TechCrunch just pushed it out. Reuters, too." "Reform only works if it's measurable," Julian said. "We don't need another apology. We need infrastructure." Around the cabin, passengers' tablets began receiving the news alerts. "Vanguard CEO launches AI oversight system after viral airline shutdown." Mia, eyes still glossy, read the headline aloud to the woman next to her. "He's not just canceling flights, he's rebuilding the rules." Noah, voice steady and reverent, addressed his phone. "This isn't just a response, it's the blueprint." Julian remained seated, but the mood in the cabin had shifted again. No longer stunned, no longer tense. It was reverent, in awe. The kind of silence that happens when people witness not just justice, but vision. Kristen was still seated near the rear galley, a hollow look in her eyes as the weight of it all settled in. Tyler sat beside her, motionless, stripped not just of his position, but of the smug certainty that had once powered his choices. Diane had stopped speaking altogether. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was calculating, finally aware that the world she understood had changed, and it no longer answered to her kind of power. Julian finally stood again, not for attention, but to close the loop. He walked down the aisle, slowly, silently. As he passed each row, people nodded. Some touched their hearts. Some whispered thank yous. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply walked with purpose until he reached the front galley. He turned to the passengers and said clearly, "This airline will fly again, but not until it can fly with integrity. And if we get it right, you won't need to record the next injustice. You'll know it won't happen." Then he turned back toward Kristen and Tyler. "You're free to go when we land, but know this. Your names won't vanish. They'll live in training manuals, policy drafts, and case studies on how the system breaks when no one speaks up. You will be remembered, but not as victims." With that, he returned to his seat, opened his tablet, and began writing. Not statements for the press, not reports for the board, but the first draft of a new company culture, the kind that doesn't begin with, "We regret the inconvenience," but with, "We refuse to tolerate it again." By the time Flight 227 finally returned to the gate, the world outside the aircraft had already changed. Cameras waited on the tarmac, news vans lined the terminal perimeter, screens inside the airport buzzed with headlines, social feeds overflowed with clips, and hashtags like hashtag Julian Carter, hashtag Apex Accountability, and hashtag Power in Silence surged across platforms. But inside the cabin, the atmosphere wasn't chaotic. It was almost sacred. As passengers stood to deplane, they did so slowly, deliberately, each one fully aware they had just witnessed something they would talk about for the rest of their lives. Julian Carter remained seated in 2A until the last passenger had exited, not for drama, but out of respect. His quiet presence had reversed a system of injustice without ever raising his voice. And now, as he finally stood and collected his briefcase, the reality of what had occurred was already echoing beyond the plane's walls. Kristen Walsh, once smug and certain, was escorted off the aircraft without ceremony. Her badge, lanyard, and device already turned over to corporate security. Her name had become a symbol, not of discipline, but of exposure. Her photo, captured mid-smirk earlier that day, now headlined articles about racial profiling and corporate failure. She didn't speak. There was nothing left to defend. Tyler Quinn followed close behind, pale and silent, carrying nothing. His access to Apex systems had been revoked mid-air, his reputation now tethered to tampering with data that targeted passengers by race and income level. Diane Heller was last to leave, no longer escorted by staff or passengers vying for her favor. Her name had been quietly removed from Apex Air's investor directory that afternoon. Behind her, a printed sign was posted in the crew corridor. "Bias is not a policy. It's a breach." Julian stepped onto the jet bridge not with vengeance, but with vision. Waiting for him was Evan Brooks, tablet in hand, displaying the latest analytics. AirVigil's launch had surpassed 2 million downloads in under 3 hours. User uploads had flooded the server. Security footage, testimonials, digital receipts of mistreatment from airlines, hotels, car rental desks, and corporate offices across the country. Isabel joined them at the gate. "We just received an invitation from the Secretary of Transportation," she said. "They want to explore implementing AirVigil as a federal monitoring tool." Julian nodded once. Let's make it open source. Bias shouldn't be protected software. It should be public knowledge. As the trio walked through the terminal, onlookers clapped, not wildly, not performatively, but with gratitude. A woman in a wheelchair nodded deeply as they passed. A black father with 2 kids reached out to shake Julian's hand. "You didn't just ground a plane," he said quietly. "You lifted something off our backs." In the days that followed, the consequences cascaded. Kristen's past complaints and internal emails were leaked to regulatory agencies. Tyler's manipulation of passenger databases triggered a federal review into data ethics and compliance. Diane's connections to lobbying groups were publicly dissected in financial ethics hearings. But Julian didn't focus on punishment. He focused on restoration. Under his direction, Sky Reform, a cross-industry coalition, was launched, mandating ethics training, transparency audits, and passenger feedback integration across all Apex Air operations. And leading it were none other than Noah Reed and Isabel Gomez. Noah as the voice of transparency, Isabel as the architect of reform. Together, they helped shape policies that ensured no flight attendant would ever be able to override a seat based on race. No technician would ever again have the power to bury a name in the system. No investor could hide behind privilege while manipulating who was welcomed and who was removed. The final piece came 6 months later, when Julian unveiled Flight Truth, a mobile platform that allowed passengers, whistleblowers, and employees to submit anonymous reports of discrimination in real time. It was built not to punish, but to protect. To keep eyes where eyes had been missing. To give voice to those who'd been quietly erased. And when asked by a journalist what he hoped to gain from all this, Julian simply said, "Nothing. I already had everything I needed. This is what I hope to leave behind." And so, the man who had been told he didn't belong in first class didn't just reclaim his seat. He redefined what first class would mean. For everyone, his legacy wasn't just that he shut down an airline, it was that he rebooted an industry. If you've witnessed bias, on a flight, in a boardroom, or anywhere your presence was questioned, your story belongs here. Share it below. Because when we speak up, we build systems that don't just fly, they rise.